1823. Bengal. The night had fallen thick and heavy. The forest seemed to breathe. Lanterns flickered along the edge of the outpost. Soldiers huddled in their posts, tense. Their eyes darted toward the shadows. Something moved above them. Something vast. Something with wings that spanned wider than any elephant could imagine. A sudden gust. The leaves shivered. The camp dogs barked. And then silence. An unnatural silence. The wind carried whispers, strange, low, almost human. Lieutenant James Harcourt wrote in his journal later. At dusk, a shadow passed over the eastern perimeter, singular in shape, singular in presence, fate unknown. Men swore they saw it swoop, low talons grazing the tree line. Others described eyes that glowed like coals. Some claimed to hear a voice, a shrill, echoing cry that pierced the night. The forests of Bengal had long been home to tales of winged guardians, spirits of the ancient trees. Yet none in the regiment had ever believed. Until that night, the air was thick with fear. Rifles shook in hands, hearts pounded, and the darkness itself seemed alive. Harcourt's pen trembled as he documented each strange occurrence. Footprints impossibly large marred the muddy banks of the river. They led nowhere, vanished as if the earth itself had swallowed them. Soldiers whispered of vanished comrades, men who went to investigate and never returned. The outpost became a place of unease. Every rustle, every shadow, every cry in the night carried the weight of the unseen. Then came the sightings, the ones that could not be ignored. A massive figure gliding just above the canopy, wings black as midnight, eyes burning with intelligence. A form larger than any eagle, yet not like any bird known. The air vibrated with the sound of its flapping, a presence that pressed down on every living thing beneath. Soldiers froze. Some prayed. Some could not look away. It had come to Bengal, and it had chosen that night to reveal itself. Whispers spread among the camp. Garuda of the Ganges, protector, punisher, harbinger of death. Local villagers spoke of winged beings that descended from the mist, taking children, punishing the unwary. Guardians of secrets buried deep within the forest. The British officers dismissed superstition, until the logs, the journals, the sketches, conflicting accounts could no longer be reconciled. Fact and folklore merged into something that defied reason, and so the forest waited, silent, watching. The winged sentinel had arrived, and the night would not forget it. The year was 1823. Bengal, India. The outpost lay at the edge of the dense Sundarbans. Mangroves twisted into labyrinths. Rivers weaved like silver snakes through the shadows. The sun had long disappeared behind a haze of monsoon clouds. Lieutenant James Harcourt had been stationed here for nearly 2 years. A man of discipline trained in the rules of the British East India Company. He knew the routines, the supply routes, the local customs, and yet nothing in his experience prepared him for what awaited beyond the tree line. The outpost itself was modest. Bamboo palisades, mud brick huts, a small detachment of soldiers. Each night, the sentries took their posts, lanterns swinging in the humid breeze, the sound of water lapping against roots, crocodiles moving silently beneath the surface. The jungle was alive. But that night, the life it carried felt different. He would later write, "There is a weight here, a presence, as though the forest itself is watching, waiting, judging." Harcourt's journal names each officer and soldier by duty, by reputation, by fear. Captain Whitmore, a man of stern countenance, Sergeant Ramesh respected by locals for his knowledge of the terrain. Private Thompson young, eager, barely acclimated. They had come from far corners of the empire, each drawn into this remote frontier, each unaware of the unseen forces that had haunted these lands for centuries. Local villagers had long told stories of shadowy figures gliding above the trees. Garuda, they whispered, messengers of the old spirits, protectors of the sacred groves, punishers of those who trespass without respect. Letters sent back to Calcutta hint at unease. Officers wrote of strange noises, apparitions in the night, disappearances that could not be explained. Yet the official record remained skeptical. Superstitions, they said, misinterpretations of wildlife, exaggerated tales by frightened men. And yet Harcourt's careful accounts did not match any ordinary explanation. Footprints far larger than any tiger, wings brushing treetops, shadows that moved contrary to the wind. Something extraordinary was being documented. The context extended beyond the immediate outpost. Trade routes ran through the forest, caravans and riverboats, British patrols and local militias. Tales of missing travelers and vanished boats were scattered across the region. A pattern emerged. Isolated reports, fleeting glimpses, whispers of winged beings. Some called it a forest sentinel, others a demon of the old gods. The British officers began to see the overlap. Folklore and fact intertwined, impossible truths buried within mundane records. The cultural backdrop was layered and complex. Local traditions spoke of protectors of nature, spirits of rivers and trees, guardians that could take form, flight, or shadow. The villagers respected the forest. They avoided certain paths, left offerings, warnings etched in bark, stories passed down from one generation to another. Harcourt, despite his rational mind, could not ignore these. Something in the forest resonated with these old warnings, something beyond the realm of colonial maps and logbooks, and so the stage was set. The outpost fragile and isolated, soldiers disciplined yet human, the forest ancient, alive, harboring secrets beyond comprehension. Time, weather, and superstition combined, creating a tension, a palpable anxiety that hung over the camp. Every rustle of leaves, every scream of a bird, every sudden shift in wind carried meaning, signaled warning, or perhaps invitation. Harcourt later noted in a letter to his brother, "We are not alone. Something watches. Something waits. Something that defies explanation. I write only to preserve truth, for others will deny it. Yet I have seen." From this context, the story of the winged sentinel begins to take form. Fact and folklore are inseparable. A British officer's journal becomes a window, a bridge between reality and legend, between the known world and the shadowed forest. And the forest itself begins to speak. The first tangible evidence appeared within days. Harcourt's journal records it clearly. Footprints of extraordinary size, imprinted in the mud along the riverbank, too large for any human, too precise for any known animal. The soldiers measured them. Descriptions varied. Some claimed claws nearly a foot long. Others spoke of feathered impressions between the prints, a combination that defied classification. Lieutenant Harcourt marked them with careful sketches, but the next morning the impressions had vanished, washed away by the tide, or deliberately erased by the forest itself. Patrols returned with stories that made seasoned officers uneasy. Private Thompson swore he glimpsed movement between the canopy, something descending silently, only to vanish when called upon. Sergeant Ramesh reported hearing flapping overhead, a sound like no bird he had ever known. Some men described a chilling screech, echoing through the mangroves, piercing, deliberate, almost intelligent. Harcourt noted each account, cross-referencing them with local reports, trying to reconcile reality with legend. Official letters to Calcutta grew increasingly strange. Reports of missing soldiers, disappearances along well-trodden paths, rations untouched, boots found near rivers, and yet no trace of the missing men. Lieutenant Harcourt's pen trembled as he wrote singular disappearance, fate unknown. The pattern is undeniable, yet explanation eludes reason. These were no random accidents. Something deliberate, something observing, something ancient. Even the wildlife behaved oddly. Monkeys refused to enter certain groves. Birds fell silent when the wind shifted. Crocodiles lingered along banks they had never frequented. Officers began to note correlations, the pattern, the timing, the direction of movement. It seemed to follow its own rules, as if the winged sentinel was mapping the outpost, watching, judging, testing. Harcourt's sketches attempted to capture the creature. Large wings folded and spread, eyes glowing in the moonlight, a head shaped vaguely like a bird, yet humanoid in proportion. Observers could not agree on size. Estimates ranged from 12 to 20 feet in wingspan, something beyond ordinary comprehension. The sketches, crude as they were, sent ripples of fear through the camp. Soldiers refused to patrol alone. Twice groups reported seeing a figure perched silently on a treetop, watching, observing, waiting. The local villagers provided context. Stories passed down through generations. The Garuda of the Sundarbans, a guardian spirit, protector of sacred groves, punisher of intruders. Many dismissed these tales as superstition, yet the villagers' warnings were precise. Paths not to take, nights not to walk, rituals to appease unseen eyes. Harcourt began to include these anecdotes alongside official reports. The lines between fact and folklore blurred, until they became indistinguishable. An incident near the river brought the most concrete evidence. A patrol had ventured too close to a grove deemed off-limits. That night, screams echoed. Shots were fired. By morning, 3 men were missing. Only their weapons and scattered journals remained. No footprints leading out. No bodies. Nothing. Harcourt's entry reads, mysterious occurrence, singular disappearance, fate unknown. Even officers who demanded rational explanations began to doubt. Letters recovered decades later hint at further anomalies. Sketches burned in the officers' quarters, confiscated journals, eyewitness testimonies never officially recorded. Every piece of evidence seemed to vanish, or be hidden. Perhaps to protect the truth, perhaps to bury it. Some accounts mentioned a shadow descending silently, lifting one soldier into the night sky. Others claimed the creature hovered over the camp, invisible by day, visible only under moonlight. The fact layer reveals patterns, disappearances along the river near the groves during stormy nights, sightings consistent across multiple witnesses, footprints and impressions appearing and vanishing, evidence that could not be explained by natural causes alone. Harcourt's meticulous record-keeping ensured that some trace remained, a skeleton of truth, upon which folklore would build. And so the camp remained under surveillance. Soldiers patrolled nervously, watches doubled, lanterns burning long into the night. Yet the winged sentinel continued, a presence hovering above, unseen yet unmistakable, observed but never captured, its actions recorded, yet never fully understood. The line between colonial report and jungle legend began to dissolve, until the forest itself seemed alive, watching, waiting. The forest itself had long held secrets. Whispers passed through generations, stories of winged beings that glided silently above the trees. Villagers spoke in hushed tones, eyes wide with fear and reverence. Garuda, protector of the sacred groves, punisher of the disrespectful, watcher of the intruder. They told of nights when the moon was swallowed by clouds, and the forest seemed to pulse with life. Footsteps heard where none should tread, rustling leaves, whispers of voices not human. Some elders claimed the Garuda would take the form of what men feared most, eyes glowing like fire, wings spanning rivers, talons capable of tearing through armor. Yet others insisted it was not malevolent. A guardian, a sentinel, responding only to the intentions of those who entered its domain. Respect the forest, and it would allow passage. Disrupt, and you would vanish. The villagers had learned to leave offerings, small tokens, prayers whispered into the wind, and in return, they survived where others did not. Stories mingled with fact. Harcourt noted the villagers' accounts alongside his official reports. At first he dismissed them. Rational thought demanded it. But patterns could not be ignored. Disappearances coincided with paths deemed sacred. Footprints appeared near river groves only, and sightings occurred when the moon shone through breaks in the canopy. The folklore explained what reason could not. It offered context. It offered warnings. It offered a key to the inexplicable. Legends described nights of thunder and wind, when the Garuda would descend from the highest treetops, eyes piercing the darkness, screeches carried across miles of jungle. Soldiers who survived described chills, the sensation of being watched, of unseen wings passing over their heads. Some villagers told of sacrifices made to appease the forest, of travelers taken into the mist, never to be seen again. And yet, not all encounters ended in death. Some returned, with stories, shaking silent eyes wide, changed forever. The British officers began to notice the influence of folklore on their men. Fear, superstition, but also caution. The soldiers took heed, avoiding certain groves, speaking softly, leaving no trace. And in doing so, they inadvertently respected the forest. The legend became a guide, a pattern to follow. Even Harcourt acknowledged it. He wrote, "There is wisdom in what the villagers fear." Perhaps the forest itself communicates through myth. Perhaps reason alone cannot navigate these lands. At night, the forest would come alive. Shadows lengthened, rustling intensified. Leaves swirled without wind. Some claimed to see forms perched high above, wings folded, waiting, watching, ancient eyes observing. Stories described the creature lifting silently into the night sky, carrying away those who trespassed, or simply disappearing, leaving behind only whispers and fear. The folklore was alive, and it merged seamlessly with Harcourt's meticulous records, tales told of previous centuries, of Rajput warriors who entered the jungle, disappeared, of Portuguese traders lost along the mangrove rivers. None returned. Each generation added detail. Each retelling sharpened the sense of dread. The Garuda, they said, was patient, immortal, ever watchful, its purpose unknown, its power unquestioned. And now, it had intersected with the lives of British officers, soldiers, local villagers. The forest had chosen its witnesses, and the world would remember. Even the landscape seemed complicit. trees shaped by centuries of wind and water, groves considered sacred, clearings where nothing grew, all marked as boundaries in the folklore. Paths forbidden, warnings etched into bark, leaves that moved without wind, sounds that mimicked footsteps, shadows that defied logic. These signs were understood by those who had lived alongside the forest, ignored by those who did not, and ignored at their peril. Harcourt wrote, "I cannot deny what I have witnessed, what the men have described. The villagers' words resonate with truth. I record them not as superstition, but as evidence that some force, some presence, lurks in these forests, unseen, yet undeniable. We are but intruders in a domain that existed long before our maps, and perhaps will exist long after we are gone." The folklore layer of Bengal's Sundarbans intertwined with fact. Sightings, disappearances, footprints, mysterious sounds, village warnings, ancient stories of winged guardians, all converged, forming a pattern, a story that cannot be dismissed, a narrative that bridges centuries between men and the mysteries of the forest, between reason and the inexplicable. And so the legend of the winged sentinel endured. Weeks turned into months, and yet the winged sentinel did not relent. Its presence pressed upon the outpost like a living weight. Patrols that had once marched confidently now returned pale, shaking, eyes darting toward treetops. The forests seemed to watch. The wind carried strange sounds, a flapping far heavier than any bird, a rustling of leaves that moved against the current. The soldiers began to notice patterns, certain groves untouched, certain paths avoided, not by habit, but by instinct, fear, respect, or perhaps recognition of something unseen. Harcourt's journal expanded with each passing week. He recorded every footprint, every sighting, every tremor of fear in his men. One night, Private Thompson described a shadow descending from the canopy. "It hovered above the river," he wrote, "and I swear it looked directly at me before gliding silently into the darkness." The description matched villagers' tales perfectly. A bridge forming between superstition and observation, between legend and the rigid world of the British officer. The local elders offered more detail. Stories of travelers and hunters who had vanished decades before. Accounts of glimpses of a giant winged figure. Wings black as night eyes like embers. Talons that could tear through armor. Some claimed the sentinel could lift a man into the air. Others said it merely observed, learning, judging, waiting. These stories were not isolated. They traced back centuries, across rivers, groves, and hidden clearings. Each telling emphasized patience, intelligence, power beyond comprehension. Harcourt began to see the motif extend beyond his immediate surroundings. Other outposts reported strange occurrences, soldiers missing along rivers, unexplained flapping overhead, footprints appearing near sacred groves, objects moved or destroyed, journals and sketches taken or burned. Even patrol logs conflicted with eyewitness testimony. A pattern emerged, a rhythm. The sentinel moved according to rules humans could barely perceive. Yet every event, every disappearance, fit into the larger framework. The bridge between folklore and reality became undeniable. The villagers' warnings were precise. Avoid these paths. Do not approach the grove at dusk. Leave offerings. Do not disturb the water. Harcourt documented these details, not as superstition, but as potential evidence. Evidence that the sentinel was intelligent, strategic, perhaps even deliberate. testing intruders, establishing territory, enforcing rules that had existed long before the British arrived. One chilling evening, a small patrol approached a grove said to be sacred, lanterns swaying in the humid air. The soldiers whispered, footsteps muffled by moss. Suddenly, a flapping overhead, heavy, deliberate. The men froze. Then a scream. Then silence. By morning, 2 soldiers missing. Footprints led to the water's edge and stopped. Vanished. No trace of the missing men. Only the eerie silence of the forest remained. The bridge between myth and fact had become terrifyingly real. Letters sent back to Calcutta from neighboring officers revealed similar accounts. Large winged shadows, swooping silently, vanishing without trace. Footprints appearing and disappearing. Officers dismissing accounts as hysteria, yet patterns consistent across regions. The British began to recognize a signature, a motif. The Sentinel moved deliberately, across forests, rivers, and villages, across months and years, its purpose, inscrutable, its presence, undeniable. Even the soldiers who had once laughed at superstition began to follow ritual, moving carefully through the forest, avoiding certain groves, listening for unusual sounds, leaving offerings as villagers instructed. Harcourt recorded these behaviors, noting the convergence of fear observation and respect, each action reinforcing the bridge between legend and reality, between man and something far older, something that had long occupied these forests before any maps, any outpost, any regiment. And as the weeks passed, the Sentinel's pattern became more intricate. Its appearances followed lunar cycles, weather patterns, certain rivers, certain clearings. The motif grew, each event feeding into a larger design. Harcourt wrote, "We are not merely witnesses, we are participants, in a narrative written before our arrival, that continues beyond our understanding, that moves with purpose, and watches with patience. The forest, alive with secrets, guided by a winged sentinel, and the bridge, stretched farther, connecting Bengal to the hidden mysteries of the land. The night was thick with humidity, the forest alive with unseen movement. Patrols returned from their posts, faces pale, eyes wide, lips trembling, whispering of a shape that defied comprehension. Lieutenant Harcourt's journal captures the terror. It appeared at dusk, wings spanning the clearing, eyes glowing like molten gold. The air trembled beneath its weight. Soldiers fell silent, and then it vanished. One patrol sent to investigate strange footprints near the riverbank never returned. Only their discarded rifles were found, lying in the mud, pointing toward the forest. But no men, no footprints leading out, no sign of struggle, just emptiness. The Sentinel had claimed them, or the forest itself had swallowed them whole. Harcourt wrote singular disappearance, fate unknown. The men vanished as if the night itself had taken them. Reports multiplied. Sketches made by the officers conflicted. Eyewitness testimonies differed. Yet a pattern persisted. The creature was deliberate, observing, testing, and always beyond reach. The forest seemed to bend to its will, shadows shifting unnaturally, leaves rustling without wind, moonlight illuminating shapes that moved, and then gone. Only a whisper remained, a presence that could be felt, but not touched. One night, Private Thompson described an encounter unlike any before. It landed on the ridge, he wrote. Its wings folded, yet it towered above us, eyes scanning. We froze. Heartbeats loud. I swear, it spoke in a language I could not comprehend. Then, with a flapping of wings, it was gone. And Sergeant Ramesh, gone with it. The journal trembled with his words, a testimony of horror and awe. The villagers' stories mirrored these events. Ancient warnings suddenly made sense. The Garuda did not simply haunt the forest. It judged, it chose, it enforced. Encounters were never random. Travelers and soldiers alike were participants in a ritual older than memory. Every flapping wing, every shadow cast on the river, was a signal, a message, or a punishment. Harcourt began to realize that what he had dismissed as superstition was the key to understanding. Footprints appeared again, larger than before, impossibly so. Spanning rocks and rivers in a single step, Harcourt measured. Sketches confirmed. The Sentinel could traverse distances that would take men hours. In seconds, it passed and vanished, leaving no trace but fear and a chilling silence that lingered. Long after the sun rose, a storm rolled in, thunder cracking through the forest, rain drenching the outpost, visibility near zero. The Sentinel struck, a figure gliding silently through the sheets of rain. Landing atop the palisade, soldiers fired, shots echoing, yet the figure remained, observed, then flapped into the darkness, disappearing as if absorbed by the storm itself. The climax of fear escalated further. Officers found journals ripped from hands, sketches burned, evidence of the encounters systematically erased. Harcourt noted, "It is deliberate. We are observed. Our records, even our memories, may not withstand its presence." Soldiers whispered of being lifted, carried above treetops, only to be returned, or not returned at all. A presence that defied physics, logic, and reason. The Sentinel moved as if it owned the forest. Every disappearance, every sighting, every vanished patrol, a pattern, a test, a warning. Harcourt documented it all, cross-referencing folklore, villagers' tales, footprints, sketches, letters, a mosaic of fear and awe. The line between fact and legend blurred completely, and the forest seemed to pulse, alive, watching, waiting. By the final nights of the monsoon, the outpost had changed. Soldiers patrolled in silence, lanterns held high. Every rustle, every shadow could be the Sentinel, or a trick of imagination. And yet, no one doubted. Its presence was real, its power undeniable. And Harcourt, in the dim light of his quarters, pen trembling, wrote, "We stand in a forest older than memory, under the gaze of something immortal, something that judges, something that watches and waits, and we are powerless, but witnesses, and perhaps that is all we are meant to be." The forest had grown quiet, or so it seemed. Lanterns swayed in the humid night air. Shadows stretched long across the bamboo palisades. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch, seemed deliberate. Observers felt the presence before seeing it, a tension that gripped the chest, a silence that pressed upon the ears, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, watching, waiting. Harcourt's final nights at the outpost were spent in fevered observation. Journals sprawled across tables, sketches pinned to walls, footprints measured, cross-referenced. Notes from villagers folded carefully beside official reports. He wrote of moments when the forest seemed to move with intent, shadows shifting faster than the eye could follow, a breeze that carried whispers in a tongue not his own, something ancient, watching, judging, waiting. On the banks of the river, the water shimmered unnaturally under moonlight. Soldiers recalled seeing shapes glide just above the surface, wings brushing against the water, eyes glowing. The air filled with the scent of damp earth, leaves crushed by something enormous. But nothing could be captured. No bodies, no footprints leading away. Only emptiness, and the lingering sensation of having been observed. Villagers told of nights when the Sentinel descended upon travelers. Tales of men lifted silently into the air, swept over the mangroves, carried into the darkness. Some returned, hollow-eyed, speaking little. Their voices trembled with fear, their bodies marked with scratches. The forest had judged, and those who survived were changed. The legend was alive. Feeding upon the memory of those who encountered it, Harcourt noted the Sentinel's behavior in meticulous detail. Appearances coincided with the moon's phases, patterns of wind and tide, sacred groves, certain rivers, each encounter deliberate, each disappearance a message, or perhaps a warning. Evidence that the Sentinel was intelligent, strategic, beyond human comprehension. Soldiers began to respect the forest, avoiding paths, speaking softly, leaving offerings, guided by superstition and by fear, and perhaps that was the forest's intention. Storms swept through the outpost repeatedly, lightning illuminating shapes perched silently above, wings folding and unfolding, eyes glowing in reflection of the sheets of rain. Soldiers fired their rifles, echoes bouncing through the mangroves. But the figure remained, observed, vanished. The storm seemed part of its design, amplifying fear, disorienting the witnesses, erasing clarity, leaving only fragments, only whispers, only dread. The journals and sketches from missing men were never recovered. Some found charred, some vanished entirely. Harcourt's own notes survived, but even they hint at truths only partially revealed. Footprints appear and disappear, objects moved, shadows crossing riverbeds, patterns repeating, disappearances aligned, and still, no one could say exactly why, or what the Sentinel desired. Time moved on. The outpost eventually emptied. New officers arrived, soldiers came and went, yet the forest remained, alive with secrets. The Sentinel's domain, still patrolled, still observing. The villagers' tales persisted. Travelers whispered of wings against the moon, shadows larger than men, eyes that follow without blinking. And the cycle continued. Could the Sentinel still watch today? Wings spanning rivers, eyes glowing through the canopy, observing those who dare trespass, testing intruders. Or was it a warning? To respect the forest, to honor ancient boundaries, to acknowledge forces beyond comprehension. No answer exists, only the forest and the lingering echoes. And so, as you listen, as the night winds swirl outside, remember, the mangroves are alive. Whispers travel with the tides. Shadows move where no human foot has trod. And the winged sentinel waits, patient, eternal, watching, judging, waiting. Perhaps it watches even now. Perhaps it has already observed you. You have just glimpsed one dossier from echoes of the unknown, a tale of vanished men, footprints that lead nowhere, shadows that defy explanation, and a sentinel whose wings blot out the stars. If you wish to uncover more, if you dare follow the shadows into the forests of legend, subscribe and step carefully, for the sentinel waits and the forest remembers.